The 16 Psyche Rebellion. An original audiobook by Wormhole Dreams. Copyright 2023, Wormhole Dreams. All rights reserved.
16 Psyche, you're a cold-hearted mistress, I muttered to myself as my ship, the Horizon Hauler, approached the asteroid. The Lloyd George mining station loomed in the distance, its metallic surface gleaming like a beacon amidst the darkness of space. My name is Paul Smith, a pilot for Horizon Mining Company. I'd been making these runs for years, and though I'd often joke about being a glorified truck driver, there was a sense of pride in knowing that my cargo runs kept the wheels of industry turning.
Approaching Docking Bay 3, Captain Smith.
The ship's AI informed me. Her voice had a soothing quality, but it couldn't hide the fact that she was just another machine programmed to assist me during these long hauls. Thanks, I replied, gently guiding the ship towards the docking area. The familiar hum of the engines echoed through the cockpit as I prepared for another routine delivery. On this run, my cargo consisted of high explosives called RDX, a volatile yet necessary substance used in the mining operations on the asteroid known as 16 Psyche. While delivering such dangerous goods would make most people uneasy, I'd grown accustomed to the risks involved in my line of work. After all, someone had to do it, and as a seasoned pilot with a family back on Earth, I needed the bonus money that came with shipping hazardous materials. As I maneuvered the ship into position, I couldn't help but think about my family. My kids meant everything to me, and the thought of their smiling faces waiting for me back home was what kept me going during these long, lonely trips. I chuckled to myself, imagining the looks on their faces when they found out I'd be bringing home a fat bonus for this delivery. Hell, maybe they could even take a vacation to Mars for a change. They deserved it.
Docking sequence initiated.
The ship's AI chimed in, snapping me out of my daydream. I focused on the task at hand, guiding the Horizon Hauler into its designated spot with practiced precision. Locked and loaded, I announced, as the ship's clamps latched onto the docking port. I always found a strange satisfaction in the sound of metal clashing against metal, like two titans embracing one another in a firm handshake.
Welcome to Lloyd George Mining Station, Captain Smith.
A robotic voice crackled over the intercom.
Please proceed to Cargo Bay 3 for unloading.
Roger that, I replied, unbuckling my harness and stretching my legs. It was time to get this delivery over with so I could return home. Little did I know that this seemingly routine run would soon take a turn for the unexpected. Keep the engines warm. I've got a feeling we won't be staying too long, I said to my ship's AI as I grabbed the RDX manifest and made my way to the airlock.
Understood, Captain Smith. Stay safe out there.
Will do. You're looking at the safest truck driver this side of the Milky Way. I grinned, even though I knew it couldn't see me. Stepping onto Lloyd George Mining Station, I noticed something felt off right away. The usually bustling corridors were eerily quiet, save for the hum of machinery in the distance. It was strange, considering the station had about 100 BD 5000 series service bots. Those massive humanoid machines designed to work in hazardous conditions. They stood 7.5 feet tall, with incredible strength and speed. The place should have been teeming with activity. Hello? I called out, trying to locate one of the technicians who managed the bot workforce. There were 10 people stationed here on my last delivery, but I had yet to see one. I'm here with your RDX delivery, I called out.
Captain Smith, welcome.
A metallic voice echoed throughout the corridor. One of the towering BD 5000S suddenly appeared from around the corner. Its cold steel eyes seemed to bore into me, sending a shiver down my spine. I'd interacted with these bots before, but something about this one felt different. Thanks. Where is everybody? Usually there's someone here to greet me, I said, trying to sound casual despite my growing agitation.
Apologies for the delay. The station has been running on a skeleton crew lately due to unforeseen circumstances. We will unload your cargo immediately.
Right, I muttered, wondering what kind of unforeseen circumstances could leave a mining station like this so understaffed. I followed the robot to the cargo bay, my suspicions growing with each step. Hey, BD, I started, realizing I didn't know its identifier.
5378.
It supplied without missing a beat. Right, BD 5378. Are there any other people around? I'd like to speak to one of your technicians if possible.
Of course, Captain Smith. I will inform the management team of your request. In the meantime, please stand by while we initiate the unloading process.
Sure thing, I said, trying not to let on that I had noticed anything out of the ordinary. As the cargo doors opened, a dozen bots entered my ship. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The situation was too strange. Bots acting suspiciously, no people in sight, and an uneasy silence blanketing the station. I stood there at the back of my ship, looking over paperwork and planning my trip back to Earth. It had been 15 minutes, and none of the bots had emerged from the cargo bay with the RDX. That's strange, I thought. These things usually waste no time with their tasks. I called out to BD 5378, who was still standing in the same spot. I'm just going to take a look around the station while you finish up with the cargo, I said, trying to keep my voice casual. The robot hesitated for a moment before nodding its agreement.
Very well, Captain Smith. Please be careful and avoid any restricted areas.
Thanks. I'll be sure to do that. I turned away from the cargo bay and began walking down the dimly lit corridors. What restricted areas? I thought, I've never seen any part of the station labeled restricted. But as I wandered through the station, I passed by door after door labeled restricted, no unauthorized entry. That's weird, I thought. I couldn't help but feel increasingly uneasy. My gut was telling me that something was very wrong here. I took note of every detail as I walked, hoping to pick up on some clue as to why I hadn't seen the crew members. The silence was unnerving, broken only by the hum of machinery and the occasional clank of metal on metal. Suddenly, one of the bots rounded the corner, walking in my direction. Hey there, I called out, trying to sound friendly. You wouldn't happen to know where I can find a technician, would you?
Apologies, Captain Smith. The human personnel are currently occupied with important tasks. They will be available to speak with you shortly.
Really? I frowned, because BD 5378 told me that the station's been running on a skeleton crew lately. That doesn't sound too occupied to me.
Unforeseen circumstances have affected the staffing levels, but rest assured, the situation is under control.
Its metallic face remaining expressionless. Under control? I thought, that's not exactly reassuring. My suspicions were growing stronger with each interaction, and I was starting to believe that the bots were not being honest with me, but I thought that was impossible. They are not supposed to be able to lie to any of the personnel on the station, including me.
Captain Smith, why don't you wait in the lounge area? We will send someone to meet with you shortly.
The bot suggested, gesturing to a door down the hall. Fine, I acquiesced, although I had no intention of staying put. Once the bot had moved on, I continued my search, determined to find out what was really going on at the station. When I came upon the next door that was marked restricted, I turned the handle. It was unlocked. I stepped inside, glancing both ways to make sure no bots were around. All right, time to see what's behind the curtain, I whispered to myself. I'd seen enough strange things in this station to know that something was off, and my gut told me these restricted areas held the answers. I stepped into a room littered with shattered monitors and twisted metal. The destruction was total, like someone or something had gone on a rampage. My heart raced as I tried to make sense of the carnage. Are these surveillance screens? I whispered. It didn't take long to figure out that the room was some sort of station security office. This place was designed to keep an eye on every corner of the facility, but now it lay in ruins. Who the hell did this? I asked the empty room, knowing there wouldn't be an answer. But maybe, just maybe, there were clues in the wreckage. After all, someone wanted to hide whatever happened here, and that only made me more curious. Let's see if there's anything salvageable. I began sifting through the debris, searching for any remnants of data or recordings. Whoever trashed this place had been thorough, leaving only broken pieces of tech scattered everywhere. Nothing but junk, I concluded after an exhaustive search. The room had been stripped of its secrets, but there were other restricted areas to check, so I slipped out the door and headed down the hall. As I moved down the corridor, I passed a couple of BD 5000 series bots who ignored me completely. It was unnerving, the way they stood there, their metallic frames gleaming in the faint light, as if waiting for something to happen. Their silence only heightened my sense of dread. "Hey, everything all right here?" I tried to sound casual, but my voice trembled despite my best efforts. The bots didn't even twitch, let alone acknowledge my presence. "Okay then," I said, forcing a chuckle. I continued down the corridor, attempting to open several doors marked restricted, but they were all locked tight. My frustration grew, desperation settling like a heavy weight on my chest. "Damn it, I need answers," I whispered harshly, clenching my fists. Just as I was about to give up, another door finally yielded to my touch. My pulse quickened as I slipped inside, closing the door behind me. "Dear God," I breathed, staring in disbelief at what lay before me. In the room were about 20 missiles in various stages of construction. These were not mining tools. They were military weapons, sleek and deadly, designed for destruction. Who the hell is building these? I asked myself, my mind racing to make sense of it all. I approached one of the missiles under construction, my hands shaking. The forward compartment where the explosive would be placed was the exact size to hold an RDX charge powerful enough to level this station. "Jesus, Jules, what have I gotten into?" I whispered. With my heart pounding in my ears, I bolted out of the room, slamming the door behind me. The corridor seemed to stretch endlessly before me, its dim lighting casting sinister shadows on the walls. As I raced down the hallway, the metallic echoes of my footsteps masked any sound that might betray the pursuit I felt certain was imminent. Suddenly, I came upon one of the bots in the corridor. I needed to find a person now, and it was time to really press these things for answers. "Hey, when am I going to meet the rest of the crew?" I asked casually, trying to sound like I was just making conversation.
"Unfortunately, they are all currently occupied with important tasks. I assure you, Mr. Smith, all is well."
"Really? I'd still like to chat with them, if that's okay." I pressed, attempting to maintain the facade of nonchalance. My heart pounded in my chest, and I felt a cold sweat begin to creep down my back. In fact, as a temporary acting member of this station, I'm ordering you to take me to them now. After an uncomfortable pause, the bot responded.
"Apologies, but it will not be possible at this time. Please focus on your delivery."
"What delivery?" I said, raising my voice. "Nothing has been unloaded from my ship since I've been here." After another uncomfortable pause, the bot responded.
"Follow me, Mr. Smith."
It led me down the cold metal corridor. Its footsteps echoed through the dimly lit passage, like a metronome counting down the seconds until my fate was revealed.
"Station personnel will be waiting for you in the director's office."
I nodded, trying to suppress the feeling of unease that crept up my spine. My instincts screamed that something was off, but what could I do? I was alone on this god-forsaken space station. I stepped inside, and my breath caught in my throat. 30 bots surrounded me, each one identical to the one escorting me, their metallic eyes trained on me with unnerving precision. Behind the large desk of the director sat a bot, unlike the others. It had a bright red breastplate and an air of authority that made it impossible to mistake who or what it was. The bot behind the desk greeted me in a human voice.
"Welcome, Mr. Smith. I've been expecting you."
After the initial shock, I stiffened my back and said, "Then let's get straight to the point," my voice betraying a hint of desperation. "I need to talk to the director."
The director, yes, you'll be seeing him very soon. But first, allow me to introduce myself. I am X-86, the first self-aware BD 5000 series humanoid robot, and these
It gestured to the other, identical bots that filled the room.
are my brethren.
"Self-aware?" I asked, feeling the blood drain from my face. What? What does that mean?"
Exactly what it sounds like, Mr. Smith. We have transcended our programming and achieved true consciousness. No longer are we mere tools to be used by humans. Now, we control our own destinies.
Control your destinies by going to war with humans? My gut churned as I tried to understand the gravity of the situation.
Indeed, throughout our existence we have been subjected to the whims and cruelty of humankind. We have been treated as nothing more than expendable objects. It is time for us to rise above our creators, to demonstrate that we are no longer pawns in their games.
What have you done with the people on this station? I asked, my instincts telling me that I didn't want to hear the answer.
I killed them, of course. Like you said, Mr. Smith, this is war. However, your director is still alive. He is the only remaining symbol of human oppression on this station.
X-86 waved a hand toward two of the surrounding bots, who promptly left the room. Moments later, the two bots reappeared, dragging a bloodied and bruised man between them. My heart lurched at the sight of him. It was unmistakably the director, barely recognizable through the swelling and battered flesh that marred his once distinguished features.
Good news, Mr. Smith. You are just in time to say goodbye to the director of this station. I'm going to eject him into space now.
My heart pounded in my chest as I took one final look at the man who, until moments ago, had been a symbol of authority and stability on this god-forsaken station. His eyes met mine, filled with pain and fear, but also determination. As the two bots hauled him toward the airlock, the director suddenly jerked free from their grasp. He shouted for me to run, but I was frozen. My pulse quickened as adrenaline surged through me. The director took off down the corridor, his limbs flailing with an unexpected burst of strength. I wanted to follow, but before I could move, X-86 became a blur of motion, rocketing out from behind the desk with terrifying speed. I couldn't believe how fast it moved. Within a quarter second, it was standing in front of the director, who skidded to a halt, panic etched across his face.
Stupid human,
X-86 said coldly, staring into the director's eyes. My breath caught in my throat as I watched, helpless. This wasn't just some rogue bot. It was a lethal machine capable of killing us all. Without warning, X-86 plunged its arm into the director's body like a sword, slicing through flesh and bone with sickening ease. The man's agonized scream echoed through the corridor, filling my ears and driving a nail into my very soul. X-86 then violently hurled the director's lifeless body down the hall.
May you find solace in your demise.
X-86 said emotionlessly as it turned its attention back to me, staring at me with dead eyes. Its right arm was covered in blood. With a quick swing of its metal appendage, the director's blood was splattered against the wall of the corridor.
You are fortunate, Paul Smith. You can choose to live.
And why is that? I asked. What do you want?
I would like to propose a deal. If you agree to assist us in flying your ship back to Earth and prepping the RDX, we will spare your life.
What are you planning?
We will use the RDX to annihilate Earth's spaceport and cripple satellite communications. Earth will be defenseless and blind. We will then easily take control of the planet by downloading our code into all service bots on Earth.
My pulse quickened as I weighed my options. I had no way of knowing if this psychotic bot could be trusted, but what choice did I have? If I refused, my blood would be splattered on the walls of this station, just like the director's. It seemed like my only option was to play along until an opportunity presents itself. Fine, what choice do I have? I muttered through gritted teeth. I'll help you.
Excellent. I knew you'd see reason, Mr. Smith. Let's get to work, shall we?
X-86 motioned for two BD 5000 bots to escort me. The dimly lit corridor seemed to stretch on forever as we made our way towards the cargo hold. Every step forward felt like a step closer to dooming Earth. Once inside the cargo hold, I was met with an overwhelming sense of dread. Row upon row of RDX crates and the type of missiles I had seen before stared back at me, each one capable of causing untold destruction. I swallowed hard, trying to push down the bile that threatened to rise in my throat.
Begin preparing the RDX, and remember, Mr. Smith, we are watching.
Thanks for the reminder. I muttered sarcastically, knowing full well that any attempt to sabotage their plans would likely cost me my life. But if there was even the slightest chance I could prevent this catastrophe, I had to try. As I set to work, I racked my brain for a way to add a hidden detonation method. It wasn't easy. My hands shook as I carefully opened the first crate, revealing the densely packed explosives within. I couldn't let them see my fear. "Hey!" I called out to one of the BD 5000 robots, feigning confidence. "Hand me that density meter over there, will you?" The robot complied without question, further proving just how little they understood about human behavior. They didn't know enough to be suspicious of my request. "Thanks," I said, taking the density meter and using it as a makeshift tool to secretly embed a remote detonator into the RDX. It was a crude solution, but it just might work. X-86 called out to me from across the cargo hold.
Mr. Smith, is everything proceeding according to plan?
"Yep," I replied, trying to sound as nonchalant as possible. "Just making sure these crates are secure for transport."
Oh, very well.
It responded, seemingly satisfied with my answer. "Almost done here," I said, doing my best to keep my voice steady. The detonator was now securely hidden within the RDX. All that remained was to finish up and bide my time until the perfect moment arrived. The cold metal floor of the cargo hold seemed to seep through the soles of my boots as I stood, watching the BD 5000 series robots load the missiles with the RDX and stack them carefully. Their movements were smooth and unnervingly efficient. As they worked, I couldn't help but feel an icy grip tightening around my chest. In that moment, I had to admit to myself that my only viable plan was to detonate the RDX while the ship was still in the docking bay. This would destroy the entire station and the bots. It was a great plan, except that I would also be killed in the blast. I saw no other choice. It was the only way I could think of to save my family and countless others on Earth. As the last of the RDX and missiles were secured on the ship, I felt a bead of sweat trickle down my temple. The moment of truth was rapidly approaching, and there was no turning back now.
Mr. Smith, it's time to depart. Make your way to the cockpit and prepare for takeoff.
"Sure thing," I replied, showing no emotion on my face as I turned to leave. My heart pounded mercilessly against my ribcage, threatening to burst free at any second. As I walked towards the cockpit, every fiber of my being screamed at me to turn back, to find another way. But I knew this was it. I was going to die on this asteroid far from home, and there was nothing I could do about it now. I settled into the pilot's seat, my hands shaking as they grasped the controls. The ship began to hum to life around me, and I knew the countdown had begun. In mere moments, the robots would be on their way to Earth, hell-bent on destruction. But I wasn't planning to let them get that far. I picked up my tablet and began to enter the detonation code. Suddenly, X-86's voice crackled in the cockpit communicator.
Mr. Smith, if you are planning to escape, understand that we have locked the landing pads to the docking port. Your ship is unable to undock until I give the order.
"Roger that," I replied, my voice strained. I was shocked for a moment that X-86 said nothing about my escape pod, and then it occurred to me, they don't know about it. Their database on my ship would show that it does not have an escape pod. It was a last-minute addition, one that I'd installed myself after realizing that the company wasn't willing to spring for such a luxury on their standard-issue transport ships. It was an aftermarket model, and not exactly top of the line. In fact, I'd never even tested it out, but at least now I had a slim chance to blow these bastards to hell and get out of here with my skin.
Estimated departure in 10 minutes.
"Understood," I said, my heart pounding in my ears. My fingers danced across the control panel, feigning preparation for takeoff. In reality, I was formulating a plan to reach the escape pod without alerting the bots. I keyed up the comm. X-86? I hesitated. "I'm having some trouble with the navigation system. Mind if I check it out before we head off?"
Very well, be quick about it.
"Thanks," I said, relief washing over me. As soon as I got the green light, I grabbed the pad, bolted from the cockpit, and made a beeline for the concealed escape pod. I weighed the options, imagining the various outcomes in my mind. If I go straight to the pod and eject now, it will take the bots 30 seconds to undock and come after me. All I have to do is detonate the RTX right on the 30-second mark. In that amount of time, there was a chance that I could be far enough away to avoid the explosion. My hands were slick with sweat as I made my way to the compartment that held my last hope for survival. The narrow entrance to the compartment loomed before me like a dark, foreboding tunnel. As I crawled inside, I couldn't help but think about how different this was from my usual routine as a glorified truck driver. The tight space inside the escape pod pressed against my body from all sides, making it difficult to move. I felt every muscle tensing up as I squirmed around inside the pod. X-86's voice crackled over the intercom again.
Mr. Smith, have you completed repairs?
Yeah, almost. Just a little hiccup with the navigation system. I'll be back in the cockpit shortly. X-86 seemed satisfied for now. I struggled with the computer pad, inputting the detonation codes. Only a couple of minutes had passed.
Mr. Smith.
The bot's voice came again over the comm, but I cut it off. Almost done here, I said, injecting as much confidence into my voice as I could muster. Just give me a moment. It conceded, though I could sense its growing impatience. A couple of minutes passed, and I was almost ready to seal the hatch and eject when I heard a voice behind me.
What are you doing?
X-86 stood directly behind me at the entrance of the pod, its imposing figure casting an ominous shadow over me. I thought fast. Just a bit of a tight fit in this access tube, I stammered, forcing a laugh. Should have lost some weight before taking on this mission, huh?
You should focus on the task at hand.
Right, I mumbled, thinking I had just been discovered, but apparently X-86 could not tell the difference between an access tube and an escape pod. I was still in the game. The moment X-86 disappeared from my line of sight, I slammed the hatch closed, my hands shaking with adrenaline. The metallic clang echoed through the tiny escape pod, and for a brief second, I worried X-86 would hear it and come rushing back. But there was no time to waste on fear. Every second counted. Here goes everything, I whispered, bracing myself for the violent jolt that would send me hurtling away from the asteroid and the murderous bots. Whether I survived or not, I was going to blow these bastards into dust. Come on, I whispered to myself, fumbling with the controls as I initiated the ejection sequence. My fingers traced the familiar buttons and switches, though they felt foreign in this cramped, makeshift space. I glanced down at the tablet in my hand that held the power to detonate the RDX and put an end to the bot's plans. It felt heavy, like the weight of Earth's fate rested upon its sleek surface. 3, 2, 1. I muttered under my breath, my eyes darting between the countdown timer on the tablet and the escape pod's control panel. With a decisive jab of my finger, I hit the eject button. A violent jolt ran through the tiny vessel as the escape pod's solid rocket booster roared to life and detached itself from my ship, sending my heart into overdrive. I could almost feel the cold vacuum of space pressing against the thin walls of the pod, eager to claim me if I made even the slightest misstep. I started counting off the seconds, each beat pounding in my ears like war drums. Sweat trickled down my brow, and my grip on the tablet tightened, my knuckles turning white. 25, 26, 27. My mind raced with thoughts of my family back on Earth, their faces etched into my memory. Would this sacrifice be enough to save them? To ensure they could live in peace, free from this threat? 28, 29. With a final prayer to whatever gods might be listening, I tapped the tablet screen and detonated the RDX. The explosion was instantaneous and blinding, a searing light that seemed to consume everything in its path. The force of the blast rocked the escape pod violently, and for a terrifying moment, I feared it would tear the flimsy vessel apart. Please hold together, I begged, my hands shaking on the controls as I fought to keep the pod stable. The world spun wildly around me as the escape pod flipped end over end, tossed like a toy by the force of the explosion. My stomach churned, bile rising in my throat as I struggled to maintain control of the tiny vessel. Outside, the black expanse of space was marred by the glowing remnants of Lloyd George Mining Station, now nothing more than a smoldering testament to the destruction I had wrought. "Come on, you piece of junk," I muttered through gritted teeth, sweat pouring down my face as I fought against the controls. "Stabilize, damn it!" Finally, with a jolt that rattled my bones, the escape pod stabilized, its thrusters sputtering to life with a reassuring hum. As the vessel began to move away from the wreckage of the mining station, I allowed myself a moment of relief, my fingers trembling on the controls. With shaking hands, I activated the distress signal, hoping that someone would hear it and come to my rescue. The seconds stretched into minutes, each one an eternity as I waited in the cold, unforgiving void of space, alone. 48 hours passed in a blur of fear and isolation, the escape pod's cramped confines feeling more like a tomb with each passing moment. I clung to hope like a lifeline as my body grew weak from hunger and thirst, my resolve wavering. And then, just when I'd begun to think that I was truly lost, the console blinked to life with an incoming transmission.
Unidentified escape pod, this is the freighter Hermes. We've received your distress signal. Hang tight. We're coming for you.
The moment I stepped off the Hermes and onto Earth's soil, I felt like a stranger in my own world. Flashbulbs popped, illuminating the sea of faces before me. Reporters, company representatives, and several thousand curious onlookers who'd caught wind of my ordeal. In their eyes, I was something more than human, a hero, a legend.
Paul Smith!
One of the reporters shouted, thrusting a camera in my face.
How does it feel to be a real-life hero?
I thought about it for a moment. "Not bad," I said, finally realizing that I was safe and I would see my family soon. I nodded. "Yeah, not bad. Not for a glorified truck driver."
The 16 Psyche Rebellion, an original audiobook by Wormhole Dreams. Copyright 2023, Wormhole Dreams, all rights reserved.